An introduction to language. I've actually put this after The Secret of Society. So if you just saw the Secret of Society video, this comes next. If you haven't seen that one, you may want to watch it first. An introduction to language. This is language, what you're actually hearing. Language is an activity of human consciousness. It's the moving of human consciousness, and at least a certain kind of moving of human consciousness. A moving of attention. It's a creative process. Universal consciousness has formed human consciousness. Universal consciousness, through its form as human consciousness, has formed language. Through language, consciousness constructs complex patterns of human interaction and sounds, but it's to direct attention, perception, and behavior. That's the function of language. Language is consciousness directing attention, perception, and behavior. How consciousness forms all that consciousness forms. Language emerged through the distinct capacities of the human brain. Neurological studies have produced ideas in language about the evolution of the human brain, distinct from the brains of other creatures, as well as creatures without brains, obviously. So human language is distinct from the signal sounds used by most animals on this planet. Human language involves syntax, or sequential meanings. In other words, the words a girl and a boy and kissed can be arranged sequentially to present distinct meanings. A girl kissed a boy, or a boy kissed a girl, or a boy and a girl kissed. Those all have different meanings. So the signal sounds of other species or animals, other species of animal besides human, do not present varying meaning depending on the sequence of the signal sounds generally. Each signal is distinct and associated with a particular action, like stop, danger, or speed up. Those signals or gestures that animals may vocalize those kind of sounds, and there are other animals that use signal sounds. Beavers, warning sounds, birds. There's various sounds that actually dolphins may be more complex, but there's definitely signal sounds used by other creatures, from dolphins slapping their tail, the signals of a deer raising its tail, and then the actual vocalizations that vary considerably within some species. So there's lots of vocal signals in other species, but there's no language in other species. How did the human brain evolve syntax, or this sequencing of sounds? Neurologists have suggested that the neurological networks for the physical act of throwing were used for sequencing words into complex ideas. I think the title of the book, Deus Ex Lingua, is the book that I learned about that. It was a little over a year ago that I learned about that. Throwing is most important for humans for one specific purpose, for hunting. The capacity of humans to effectively hunt by accurate throwing is what allowed for humans to access large quantities of nourishing animal fat, especially the omega-3 fatty acids EPA and DHA. The large intake of those fatty acids over time allowed for human brains to develop capacities far beyond the brain capacities of any other species on this planet. Back to throwing, the neurological process of throwing is extremely complex. The sequence of muscular contractions and electrical signals for accurately throwing is quite intricate, especially to hit moving targets. Other animals are not nearly as accurate as throwing as humans. The only system comparable to the intricacy of throwing a knife or a spear is the guided systems for missile rockets, which are even named after the word used for weapons that are thrown, missile. That's actually, like throwing a spear or even a rock. So those missile rockets are extensions of humans' capacity to throw for purposes of causing violence, basically causing, injury and death. So human biological selection favored the ability to throw. Humans that could throw well survived and thrived. Then humans also developed the capacity for language, which allowed for them to be much more effective in group hunting than they could be individually, even as rather accurate throwers. When they worked together, they could corner animals and corner groups and get closer. Uh, so, the human brain grew even faster as a result of the increased success of the humans who not only could throw much more accurately than any other creature, but could work together to hunt their prey effectively. Then, through their large brains and their use of language, humans worked together with each other and developed the capacity to build things like bombs. Then, eventually, to fly them with great precision through the air across miles and even oceans on the tips of a type of rocket called a guided missile. Humans created these flying rocket bombs not for hunting, but for thinning out the competition from other humans who could also throw and talk and hunt and perhaps even build bombs and guided missiles. Bombs are for killing humans, uh, not so much for hunting. Killing humans could be relevant whenever there are so many humans around that resources like wild game or fossil fuels are getting scarce. The first tribal wars were for competing over hunting territories. Modern wars are similar but distinct. Modern war is for killing humans, but also for intimidation, as in diplomatic control of other humans, for governing, for empire, for we could say for commercial purposes, but again, when I say commercial purposes, I mean things like access to oil, access to fish, wild game, uh, human populations that are well trained to perform specific economic functions, that kind of thing. In other words, slaves, or including slaves. So, why is it valuable to control other humans? They can be discouraged from hunting scarce remaining wild game uh, if one controls those humans. They can be discouraged from accessing or using scarce fossil fuels, or from eating animal fats like the omega-3 fatty acids EPA and DHA. There's only so much of that stuff around. Um, Also, language is one of the most dangerous of all technologies. Weapons of mass destruction can be important for influencing the language of other humans, since language is part of the process that directs behavior, such as hunting and dieting and warring and so on. In other words, killing and intimidation are also important in controlling the language of other people. I haven't given the background of all that yet, but if other humans are to be most easily conquered or controlled, then using language and all other means to discourage them from warfare are important. You want to propagandize the masses to be against warfare and against um, propaganda, even. So they should be trained to be ashamed of things like hunting and warring, to fear it, to not even mention it. They should also be indoctrinated to consume unhealthy food and avoid healthy food. They should be kept desperate, distracted, and confused. The effective use of violence and also of language is essential for a lasting system of government. People should be taught that churches and the media and corporations and governments are all isolated and competing against one another rather than branches of a single metaphorical tree. Drama and contentiousness and antagonism are essential in keeping a target population divided and conquered, as in controlled or governed or ruled or organized. So, in politics, it's normal to have, whether it's two candidates or two parties or the ruling group and then some protest group, it's normal to have some kind of a false contrast where there's a presentation of a contrast, but the contrast is within a very limited range of spectrum, and it might be, should we raise taxes 8% or 9%? And those are the two opposing arguments, and really both groups are cooperating to raise taxes at least 6%. So you have things like that. That's the only example I think of right this moment. But what I just presented to you, of course, is an introduction to language. But you can see and hear how complicated the social systems can get with their use of language and how they actually set up models of what people think is right and wrong. That only exists in language. There's no right way to eat. But there are FDA approved ways to eat. There are ways to eat that people are trained to fear. There are ways to eat that people are trained to value, like, that's an extremely good thing to eat because there's lots of commercials that say pizza or beer or whatever is really good. Who is it good for? Well, it's good for the people who are selling it, for sure. And obviously, there's some attraction to it, or lots and lots of people wouldn't be doing it. But it may be that there are actually better things to eat than beer. For instance, you don't see a whole lot of wine commercials, but some people pay, several times more for wine than they do for beer. So, propaganda, public relations, advertising, those are all not just in language, but those all include language, and they're all economic, and language is for directing attention, perception, and behavior, and for promoting the interests of particular species, particular organisms, particular groups. That's what it's for. We may be taught that it shouldn't be used for that, but again, that's propaganda in language.